All right. Hello, everyone. Hi,
Hello.
Marcella.
Hi.
Really happy to see you today in another session, technical session. As you asked a lot about our CI/CD and how it works, so we're gonna talk today about the CI/CD of Brainboard, how it works technically, the use cases, and answer all your questions beyond Brainboard and beyond the CI/CD of Brainboard, because we know managing the infrastructure is not an easy one. So just a quick presentation about ourselves. I'm Shafiq, the founder of Brainboard, and I've been building infrastructures for the last 16 years. I got my hands dirty on a different kind of infrastructure. And I'm today with our champion, Marcella.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Marcela. I'm one of the cloud architects at Brainboard, specialized mostly in Azure, but lately also in Amazon.
Oh, yes, she is coming to Amazon landscape.
Yeah, so we
All
are
right.
multi-cloud, so of course we will cover all the cloud providers. So,
Yes. So just briefly about Brainboard, what it is for those who discovered it. It's a solution that allows cloud architects, DevOps, SREs, platform engineers, even managers, directors of the cloud to visually design and manage cloud infrastructures. And this means as well, like part of it is to standardize the infrastructure as code, because we're going to see it, it's a solution that allows you to centralize and build best practices, naming conventions, gather all the team around the same vision of the infrastructure. So before we start talking about Brainboard and how it works, and I see some of the names that I know. Hi, John. um, so just see the journey of the cloud infrastructure. It starts usually with the specs. I mean, sometimes it doesn't start with specs. Maybe Marcella, you know better than me. You have seen different environment, and sometimes you just need to ship it without specs. And it ends up usually with I mean we deliver the infrastructure in a way that hopefully we can manage it. Otherwise, it's just a patchwork. So, and there are some steps in between from, I mean, to go, this is a path to go from the specs into the delivered infrastructure. There are different steps that we go through. We usually, the engineers start with the design of what they want to do. Then they translate it into code, whatever the code is. Brainboard is mainly Terraform, based on Terraform, but whatever the code, it could be Pulumi that we're seeing getting some traction. It can be YAML for anything YAML based. Then we're going to test this code, review it. If we are disciplined enough, we're going to write documentation. Most of use cases, I mean, documentation is updated the very same day we write it. And once it's validated, then we can deploy. So we are used to like to talk about this slide a lot. So which means like the Terraform code is a delimiter between the two words. The first one is before having the code, and the second one is after having the code. After having the code, we have multiple solutions. It's literally more than 200 solutions. We saw it in the last webinar. Actually, we did the topic of the last webinar was about what the CI/CD means for the infrastructure. I highly advise you. It's not for Brainboard. It's a global picture of all what's happening in the industry and the solutions that exist out there. And so today we're going to talk about our engine, CI/CD engine, and how it works, which makes Brainboard now a complete solution, like an end-to-end solution that allows you to go from the specs into the delivered infrastructure in a secure and confident way, and keep managing the infrastructure that way. So without a lot of explanation, let's go into Brainboard. I don't know if you want to touch base, Marcella, about the architecture, how like your own experience with the Brainboard and how you're used to building infrastructures.
I think that with this demo that we would do now in the beginning, we would also give an idea to new users how we would use Brainboard. I'm used to now creating a lot of templates, a lot of architectures in Brainboard. It's becoming like really simple and really fast for me to create infrastructures. And also with the CI/CD is also like I'm making sure that the infrastructures that I'm creating are really secure and I have a validation of the architectures. So we can start
Yeah.
with the demo and see it step by step.
Yes, and for today we selected AWS because we like for the last 3 or 4 webinars we have been talking about Azure, and AWS users told us, please don't forget us. So we're trying to do our best to be fair with all the cloud providers. So I selected this cloud infrastructure for Elastic Beanstalk. We can have the same design for the web apps, for example, based, and correct me if I'm wrong, Marcela, you're stronger than me on this part. We can have the same thing on web apps. So this is the interface of Brainboard when you first log in. You have the designer where you can build your cloud infrastructure. So just being mindful of the time, I'm not creating an infrastructure from scratch, just work on an existing one. And let's say, for example, yes, when I design infrastructure, I have the Terraform code that you see here generated on the fly for me. You don't write it. So, for example, I want to add a virtual machine into the design. I just select the virtual machines that exist here, and I just drag and drop it. Like I want to add a new virtual machine here. I drag and drop it. The first power of Brainboard is that it detects the relationship between the resources. So for example, here, it detected that I added the virtual machine inside the subnet, availability zone, and VPC. And the most important part is that it writes the Terraform code for me. So I have it here. And of course, I have all the parameters that are supported by both Terraform and the cloud provider, whatever the cloud provider. Actually, we support the big three, Azure, AWS, and GCP. And we added a few months ago OCI. And here I can, let's say, for example, I give it a valid information to be able to deploy it. So I just select the instance type. Let's go for the large. Okay, so once I build infrastructure, and I can, so the code will be updated automatically, whatever the complexity of the code. So here you're seeing multiple syntax. So Brainboard, you can do exactly the same things that you are used to do with Terraform. So if you want to use loops, you want to use like count, for each, or any advanced syntax, you can do it. And as we are talking about the CI/CD, why we are like doing this rough, like quick demo, because the CI/CD, it doesn't start when you push the code. The CI/CD is part of your workflow, because the purpose of the CI is to put conditions to integrate the code into the repository. And that's the purpose, for example, of the reviews. We make sure that the pull request is clean and complies with the code that we want to merge, then we merge it. And I'm highlighting this because, yes, the workflow starts when you design. And as we are talking about the CI/CD, so here, when you work within Brainboard, you can say, okay, I want to see the changes as the impact of the changes as I bring them. So you have the possibility to do, for example, a plan if you want to, like a quick validation of your work. So here, when we do the plan, Brainboard creates an execution environment on the fly, converts the graphics into Terraform, executes action, and now gives me the output of my infrastructure. And this is here, for example, this is pure Terraform. And as we are all engineers at Brainboard, and it came from our background, like we separated the pure pipeline from the quick actions that we do, because we know that when we build infrastructure, we want to be quick to fail fast. In case any errors, I can see them and fix them without going to the pipeline. Maybe we just talk about this slide, which makes sense. about what is expected from the CI/CD, because as we will go deeper in the demo, you are going to see all these concepts. So the CI/CD for the infrastructure is completely different than the application. And maybe you can explain a bit, Marcella, if you can help us understand why the infrastructure is different than the application. You have a dual background, application and infrastructure.
Yeah, it's different because applications work in a different way from infrastructures, and when we are deploying an infrastructure is different from when we are deploying an architecture, because we are creating resources. And also because when you are deploying an infrastructure, you do it one time and you do maybe some changes in the future. It's not that often that you do this deployment of the infrastructure in comparison to the deployment of an application. There are also different.
Yeah, this is a
Yeah.
very important point about like what is called immutable infrastructure. The application, goes within the immutable infrastructure, while the infrastructure is the target. I mean, if you change it, you need to know what you are doing. Um, so yeah, what is expected from the infrastructure? So like you need to test. There are three areas that we are seeing a lot. What makes sense for the infrastructure is testing the code, making sure that the code is valid. Um, and within the code, there are different parts, like the syntax is valid, then the linting applies to the linting principles that you have within your team, and also maybe the naming conventions and best practices. And this is just like process for the team. We need to check the security of the infrastructure before doing any change. And also, if we are mindful about the costs, we need to understand what's the impact in terms of costs of the change before we bring it. Of course, part of it, it's notification, because it's like a live system that execute actions and notify people or other systems about what is happening. And as what is expected from the CI/CD solution is to have a kind of mechanisms for approval. This is extremely important because even if you validate the code and you merge into the repo, sometimes you need an approval to push it into production. Especially for the infrastructure, you need an approval to change, for example, the firewall rules, even if the code is correct and is merged.
Yeah, and usually this is also related to the costs, because there is some
Yes,
level of management that needs to approve the creation of the infrastructure.
exactly. And maybe we are seeing a lot of FinOps team now that may gate the deployment if the costs are over budget. Yeah, this is a very nice point. And of course, this is a specific to Terraform, what is like the Terraform state. The nature of Terraform when it executes, it uses the Terraform state, which is extremely critical part because it should have one execution at a time working on the Terraform state. Otherwise, you may corrupt it. And if the Terraform state is corrupted, good luck. I mean, in many ways. So yeah, so back to Brainboard. So this is the first part that we have seen. I build infrastructure, and let me split here one tab for the design and one tab for the deployment. Okay, so here I have the design. I can keep changes. And by the way, we highly advise you to use variables, and it makes a lot of sense. I will show you later. Like you can define any variable at any level, and you can assign them to architectures in a way that that is predictable. Let's say, for example, I define a variable at the project level, which means any environment or architecture I create within this project will have this variable injected by default. And this is something that Brainboard handles it for you without any workaround, without any scripting, without any copy pasting, without anything. It's out of the box. And okay, as we are talking about the CI, it means the central point in so many cases is the Git repository, because this is how the classic, how it works in the application. When we do the pull request into the Git repository, the CI servers will execute some kind of checks and some kind of checks based on what we have already defined and give us the validation if the code is ready to be integrated or not. Once it's integrated, this is like the part of the history. And within Brainboard, you have like the same mechanism, of course, but you also have what we call it snapshots. So you can create multiple versions, because we know, and this is extremely important, before you do the pull request or the merge request, it depends if you're using GitLab or GitHub, you need to make sure that the code is valid. You're not going to push a dirty code every time to the pipeline and wait until the test finishes to understand that there is problems to fix. You make sure that the code is valid before deploying it. And for this, you can create multiple versions within Brainboard. So here I can create a new version, for example, call it add VM. And now I have a graphical history of all the changes that happened to my infrastructure. So if I want to go back to the initial commit, I click on it, and I had these design, and I removed some, like the auto-scaling group and different things. And you can see the Terraform code is updated as well. And if I want to check any point-in-time version, I just click on it. I have the design with the Terraform code updated, as you can see here, which means it allows me to visually understand what changed, and be able to understand, okay, oh, this resources have been added, others have been removed. With this, you can create a pull request, of course. So here you can choose any repo. We support GitHub, Azure DevOps, Bitbucket, and GitLab, and do the pull request, public and private ones. Once you do the pull request, this is like if you want to store the code into your repo, or use Brainboard engine, the CI/CD engine, to deploy the infrastructure. The last point before we dive fully in the infrastructure is the collaborative nature of Brainboard. So I'm seeing here Marcella that is connected to the same infrastructure as me, and I can see when she selects any resource. I don't know if you can select any resource, Marcella, here in the design that I can. Yes, I can zoom here. I can see Marcella selecting the resource. I can also see the changes that she will make. If you can do any change that on the infrastructure.
Yeah, I can try to add some resource maybe.
Yes.
And to remove it later, maybe. Okay. And now I have created an elastic container registry.
Yeah, perfect. And I can see it here, like Marcella is selecting this resource as the repository. The most important part is we have instantly the same design, but also the same Terraform code. So if she is, and we are in different cities, we are completely in two different countries working on the same infrastructure, and I can see instantly the code that is updated. All right, and why I mentioned the collaboration, because this is an extremely important part when we work on the infrastructure, especially for the CI/CD, because maybe I need help from one of my colleagues. Let's say, for example, Marcella, I started working on the infrastructure and I'm stuck, and she can just get connected to the same environment than me. I mean, it works on my laptop, but who knows what happened on the CI. We share the same context, and she can help me and say, okay, in your design, you have this resource, and in the code, you have a missing parameter, and it's extremely powerful. All right. So now when we move to the CI/CD engine, what we have done within Brainboard, so if you use the classic, the legacy way of building the CI/CD, whatever, GitLab CI, GitLab CI, GitHub Actions, Jenkins, whatever the tool that you find out there, they are all based on YAML. And these based on YAML means that if you have dependencies between stage, you need to write them explicitly. Say, okay, this stage depends on that stage. This stage is before the commit, after the commit. This stage is, so you need to structure it. And if you need to make changes, so you need to review everything to understand the dependency. And sometimes you need, for example, to do parallel actions. So these parallel actions, you need to specify it as well. And what we have done in Brainboard, we said, okay, let's embed this thinking process natively into Brainboard. So for example, here I can start. I usually start with a code validation. And Marcela, you may have a better insight, so feel free to interrupt me. And I start with code validation and call it here code validation. In code validation, you can do the Terraform plan or apply, validate or plan. I do Terraform plan. Then once the code is valid, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to check the Terraform, the TFSec, and let's go. I put medium here to catch any error that I have. Then I can put Terrascan if I want to have like the CIS benchmark. I call it here CIS checks. All right, I can skip rules. I can put specific rules to scan. We can go deeper and show you how it works. And here as well, I can call it security checks. And sometimes I personally track the costs. So I can use infracost. You can use infracost. For example, here, I'm going to add infracost. I just added my API key here and call it cost estimation for my infrastructure. And okay, let's say this is the first part of my workflow where I want to have a clear picture of the change and the impact that it have. So now I save the workflow and I trigger the pipeline. When I trigger the pipeline, I created, without any specific knowledge of YAML, I created 2 stages with dependencies. And this stage, for the second stage, will not trigger until the first one finishes. And I can show you like different mechanisms, different scenarios and strategies. And then, okay, once it succeeds, I can see the output. All right, the second one will execute. And the second one, all the actions are parallel. So which means Brainboard will execute the 3 of them at the same time. And now I can see some errors. I can see here, I have the output that comes from the infrastructure. I can see, all right, I have a lot of things to deal with. So here, I have the root block device that is not encrypted. I have the VPC flow log that is missing. And I have a lot of things to deal with. And this is for the TFSec. For the CIS, it's almost the same, but I have the severity, and I can see it. It's almost the same, but it's based on the CIS benchmarks. I can also see the cost estimation for my infrastructure. For this one, for example, here it's $80, so I can understand that. Okay, this is the cost of the infrastructure, and they have the breakdown. This is infracost. It's not Brainboard. This is infracost, but as it's implemented within Brainboard, you have the same view. All right, and now I can see that, all right, I have some security issues in my infrastructure. I go back to the design and fix them. So let's remove, for example, this EC2 because I don't want to configure everything for it. And then I'm going to add flow logs, for example. And I drag and drop the flow logs here. Brainboard detects this. And now it's going to write the Terraform code. I added the resource with the Terraform code. And now, okay, I create a new version, call it add flow logs, flow log, and remove VM. I personally create so many versions to track even my thinking process, how I build infrastructure. Then I trigger the pipeline again. And this is extremely important, which means what I'm doing here is that it's like in my own laptop, in my own desktop, I have the complete pipeline of the production close to where I build infrastructure, and it's extremely quick. I can see them, I can change them, and I can do anything that makes sense for when building the infrastructure. And now I can see the checks are green. The TFSec is green, no problem detected. And you have the history before I have a problem, and after it's green and the pipeline is green. So, and the cost estimation, the cost should change because I changed, yes, it's like now 60 back, 17 back, sorry, because I removed the virtual machine that cost like almost 50. All right. So, and this is the way you go from design and until having a valid Terraform code that matches all the steps. Once it's green, now I'm ready to do the pull request. So here I can go here and pick, for example, GitHub or any other resource, Brainboard demo. I do CI/CD demo, and now I do the pull request into my GitHub if I want to persist the code into GitHub. So here, Brainboard, and this is, by the way, my private GitHub. I can see the changed files. I have everything here, and I can approve it or discard it or take it from here to deploy. All right, so this is the first part, that is the pure CI, where Brainboard is used to build infrastructure and check every change. And now we can go deeper and say, okay, now I want to have my workflow, once it works, I want to add more things. For example, I want to add the OPA checks. For example, here, you can add any policy, and you can add as many policies as you want for like specific policies. And I have a sample example of OPA. And this is one of the most challenging plugins to work with. Marcela,
Yeah,
I think
I
you
can
played with
confirm
it.
that, yeah. But it's used a lot, so it's really important to have it.
Yes. So for example, let's say I want, yes, this code. So what I put in the policy here, the package Brainboard, and I want to just check that in the security group, AWS security group, it's not open bar, so it's not publicly open. And now in the decision, I put here the decision that I want is Brainboard deny, because I want to focus on the deny. All right, I can now save it and trigger the pipeline. And now I'm going to see in the pipeline, once it runs, the output of my OPA. And you can build like a complete stack of your pipeline, and you can add stacks. You can add every time extremely easily. You don't need like anything. You just visually edit, and if you are not satisfied, I can just remove it here to go back to the initial one. It doesn't impact the running pipeline, because we version actually every execution with its pipeline. So when I click on this pipeline, for example, I can see even the configuration of like, for example, of the notification here. I can see all the information. I can see here all the information as well at that time. So here everything is clean. I open my OPA and the check is passed because, yes, respectful, because I comply with the rule. So I have here the OPA. Okay, and I can keep building my workflow. So here I'm going to put back the OPA and Brainboard/deny. Then after that, I want to inform the team. So maybe like send an email to the security at brainboard.co. Then yes, with the infra is ready, and you can see I like the most important thing is that I build a pipeline, I build the logic instead of getting lost in the learning curve of the YAML or Groovy. I'm seeing in the chat that some of the people have been hit by the Groovy. So it's extremely important to not lose time, especially if you maybe switch tools. All right, so here I send an email. Then maybe I'm going to put Slack for the DevOps team, like DevOps inform DevOps team. And then put some message, the infra is good to go. All right, here I'm going to put the URL. This is just an example, HTTPS. It should be valid one. Let's say brainboard.co. All right. And once I do that, now, okay, for my pipeline, I'm going to say, I'm going to run a Terraform apply, but this is like something extremely important. I want an approval. And the approval, the way we build it in Brainboard, like we wanted to provide maximum flexibility and maximum control, and try to like to find a way to have like both of them. What we have done, if you trigger the approval, everyone who is authorized to access the pipeline is able to approve, or you can put specific ones. So for example, here, I'm going to add Marcella as the one, the approver. And once my infrastructure is deployed, Marcella approve it. Let's say, call it here, for example, deploy on approval. Once the infrastructure is deployed, maybe I want to reach out to Jira or ServiceNow or any external ticketing system that you want to import through the webhook. And here I can just put HTTPS. I know a lot of you maybe hate Jira or ServiceNow, but just giving an example. And here, put the information, and that's it. And this is my pipeline ready to go. And I built it. It took me literally maybe a minute or two. I put all my process, all the approval, or people that are supposed to work on it, and ready to go. And to take it to the next level, let's say, for example, about the approval, I mean, before running all this, let's gate this one. So for this one, I need an approval from Marcella. Okay. So here, if the approval from Marcella, and save it, if I run the pipeline, so here, yes, it will tell me that the job is waiting manual approval, because I'm not the one that is supposed to approve, and I cannot click to approve it. Only Marcella can do. So can you, Marcella, please approve the task? All right. And it's
Yes, I approved it.
Yes, Marcella approved the task, and now it's ready to go. It's going to deploy the complete infrastructure, does the checks, and complete the infrastructure. And of course, you have the possibility to stop the pipeline. Like I say, okay, all right, that was a mistake. I don't want to do it. I just stop the pipeline. And it's immediate. You can stop the pipeline, and you have the status is terminated. It doesn't. It has not been deployed. And you can see what are the tasks that has been triggered and what are the tasks that have been terminated. So like in a visual way, you can understand, especially this is important for troubleshooting. You can understand where the change happened and by who. And of course, you can download any output. Maybe if like you have an audit or a report to do, you can download the output or do it the way you want. And let's say, for example, okay, this is my pipeline. I'm happy. That's good. Every time I do the changes, I go through the pipeline, and it works. One other point before we move to the next step is the dependency. So every time you create, this is like a horizontal dependency, sequential. Every time, like when to move to the next stage, all the tasks in the previous one should pass. Should be green. But if I want to bypass this error, this dependency, I can just put here ignore failures. Like, okay, even if it fails, it doesn't matter, because like, for example, it's the cost estimation, and I know like this is a critical infrastructure, I need to deploy it. Even if it fails or whatever the check, I'm ready to go. So which means this is like implicit dependencies, and that you can override if you want, if it makes sense to you. And all the stacks, all the tasks in the same stage are supposed to be executed in a parallel one. I don't know.
I use ignore failure. I use the ignore failure in many cases with TFSec. Maybe I can give an example from experience, because there are cases when the TFSec, it checks just one resource for the security, but it doesn't consider the whole infrastructure. And the infrastructure can be really like complex. For example, I can have a firewall that has a lot of rules, and because I have isolated my network, I don't want to care about the security of one resource, because I know that it is secure. And there are cases when you want to bypass the security check from TFSec, and I use this ignore failure, but I still want to have it in the pipeline because I want to see the output. So this is one of the cases where I use it.
Exactly. This is very, very nice use case and like concrete example. You reminded me when you talked about security checks, for example, you can skip the rules here. Like, for example, rule 1, you need to know the ID, especially for Tiara scan. Oh, sorry, the scan. You can skip the rules, which means you want to enforce them, but you can say rule 1 or rule like 894. I'm going to skip this rule. And now the only this rule will be excluded. And this is like important as well to track. Maybe we have for some reasons, the application is public. We want it to be public, and the plugin will tell us it's public. Make sure that it's not public, but it's okay. I want to exclude this specific rule. And I've seen in the chat that one of our friends, John, by the way, asked about if we can create templates. That, like, you anticipated my question. This is the way you scale your work. Like, let's say I'm satisfied with this pipeline, and this is a pipeline I want to apply to every infrastructure I have, but I do not want to repeat myself and create the pipeline every time. So I have the possibility here to convert it into a template, and I call it CI/CD webinar. And now this template is now in the templates catalog. So you can see it here at the bottom. And you can see we have a lot of templates that we use internally. And this is the template. What we advise you to do as well is sometimes you may have a template for the CI and another one for the CD. So you can just pick the one for the CI, work on it. Once it's validated, you pick the one for the CD. Or the best case, this is what we do at Brainboard. We do not ignore failure, because we want, like, this is the part that we want to validate, part of the CI, and once for the CD we put approval, and we do not deploy until the person approves. Okay, now I created the template into one infrastructure, and let's say I'm going to create a new infrastructure. Let's say here I'm going to create, let's switch into Azure. Or let's pick one from the template. So here from the template, I'm going to select Azure. So to be fair about having both AWS and Azure. And let's say I want to take this architecture, Azure multi-origin web application. And this is, by the way, very nice use case. Okay. Once I clone this architecture, I have the complete infrastructure here, and I switch into Azure to have the Azure resources. Okay, so this infrastructure doesn't have a pipeline. What I do, I just go into the templates catalog of the pipelines and pick the one that I call it CI/CD webinar, or the name that you want. This is like the official one that I use, and that's it. I clone it. I have the complete pipeline. And all I have to do now, just trigger the pipeline. And this is extremely helpful because you shift from, we need your approval, Marcella, on this one, if you can approve it as well. And as I told you, like, every configuration that you put in a task is kept in the CI/CD. And you shift from building the pipeline and tinkering about having things the way you want into strategizing and putting strategies. And the most important part is like bringing anyone working on the infrastructure to understand what's happening and what's going on. All right, so here, once the Marcella approves it, yes, it has been approved, and I can see, all right, it has been approved by Marcella. Okay. Now I can see the execution. Okay, stop the pipeline because we have the deployment. And the pipeline, I cloned it from the template. It contains all the information. It contains my API key. It contains the approval people that are supposed to approve. It contains like the emails that the people that should be notified. So you can create as many templates as the use cases that you have and just use it. And I see, Marcella, maybe we have some questions.
Yes, and I see that users are responding to each other, and I love when that happens because I saw a question about the infra cost. one of the users asked for the infra cost, and if it is possible to see for different resources the cost, not just the total cost. And yes, that is possible.
Yeah,
And then you can go back to your infrastructure and just modify the resource that you see that is the most expensive. So yes, that is possible from infra cost. And we have also a question, do you have templates for Azure DevOps, or I will be able to create workflow for Azure DevOps with Brainboard?
Workflow for Azure? No, this is not for Azure DevOps. I mean, we take all the complexity of any other solution. Like Brainboard allows you to design Brainboard pipelines, not any YAML pipeline. So we are really into trying to shift your and save you time into going through too many details just to do small things, into visually design the target of what you want to do. And the one who asked about the breakdown, you have here the breakdown. And by the way, in the plugin infra cost, you can specify the diff or the breakdown between the previous execution. Like you do the breakdown when it's the first execution. You want to understand exactly the resources and how much they cost. Once you deploy, it's better that you switch it into diff. I personally use both of them. Like if I take one of my pipelines that I use, that I call it full battery. Yes, or maybe, yes, this one, AWS template. Here, I use both of them. So I have the diff, and this one is diff, and the second one is breakdown, to be able to understand, like, okay, this is the full breakdown, and this is what changed between the last execution. Any other questions, Marcelo, maybe from your own experience?
We have also a question about how do we connect Brainboard to the environment, about the credentials, how we use it. This is related also to security, so maybe we can have a look also at that, how we put the credentials and how we store the credentials, because that's really important.
Yes, this is a very nice question. So here you can set the credentials of the providers. For example, here I have different credentials for AWS or Azure or any cloud provider. To put a credential, this is a very important one, like A, B, C. And now I can just put it as a default credentials, or for example, here specify the scope of the infrastructure, like specify exactly where I want these credentials to be used. And this is as far as I know, we are the only one to provide this, to give you the complete view of all the environment that you have and specify which key you want to use. And of course, to this question, it reminds me something very important related to the CI/CD of the infrastructure, which is the Terraform state. We talked about it here. Like the state is one of the critical, the parallel execution. When we start any action within Brainboard, let's say, for example, I start here, let's say a plan, or any action that uses the state, Brainboard locks the state. So here, all the options are disabled. And if I want to try to trigger the pipeline by accident because I didn't see it, here Brainboard will tell me you're not allowed to run multiple pipelines at the same time, because we know that it's extremely critical. So Brainboard protects you from this part. And we implement our locking mechanism in a way that, okay, when there is one execution, you are sure that there is only one execution on the state. The second part of the state is the possibility to use your remote backend. And this question maybe comes from people that use maybe Terraform Cloud or another CD solution, or maybe their Git solution. So you can use maybe the one who asked about Azure DevOps, because they have requirement to deploy through Azure DevOps. So you can here, you can still deploy with your Azure DevOps and specify the Terraform backend. Like, for example, you can say, my Terraform backend is in Azure Blob Storage or in S3, and they are shared between Azure DevOps and Brainboard, which means I can use Brainboard as the CI tool. Every change I do, I can see it. I can understand the impact exact on the same Terraform state, so which means the same infrastructure. And when the state is changed on Azure DevOps or any external system, it will be visible to the same infrastructure. And of course, you can rely fully on Brainboard. We have our own backend as well, and we give you even like the possibility to strategize and to put variables on the name of the state, like using the architecture ID if you want uniqueness, or you want to put it into specific storage location. You can customize all this, and your CI/CD will not be disturbed.
And we have a question in the chat. Is it possible to use 2 or more infrastructures with this pipeline?
Yes, use 2 or more infrastructure with this pipeline. Yeah, this is what I said. If you convert it into a template, you create a new infrastructure. I call it, for example, new architecture. And this new architecture, it will be blank. It doesn't have any pipeline. I just go here into the template, and for example, I take my full battery. So here is my pipeline. I just clone it, and I have the full pipeline ready to be used.
Okay.
I hope I answered your question, Babita. In all cases, you can reach out to us through email or through LinkedIn. We'll be happy to answer.
And I also have a question, because for me as a cloud architect, it's important to see who is running the pipelines, when they run the pipeline, what they are doing, like how is Brainboard handling this?
Yes. And this is what, I mean, you asked a question about the way we used to work. For example, yes, when I run the pipeline, this is a new one, doesn't have pipeline running yet. Let's come back to this one. And now if I go to the pipeline, I can see who run what and which pipeline. And for example, let's say like I'm running into an issue, like I can see here, I can see from every action what was the execution. I can see also all the configuration of any action. And of course, if I share it with, just share the URL here, I just take this URL and, for example, close it. And now I share the link with Marcella. I said, okay, Marcella, please, I have a problem with this specific task. Can you just help me? I think it's like I make life easier for those who will help me. So you just share it. Brainboard goes directly to the pipeline, to the exact task, and they can say, okay, she will be able to tell me like, okay, you missed, you have the problem with this configuration or that configuration, and she has the full context. So she can just switch here and see the design, and she has the same view as me when creating it.
And now that I was seeing the design, I remember that also we have the possibility to send the output to external users, like to users that don't have access to Brainboard. We can download the output and also send it by email if they want to see like the output of their plan, or and make sure that everything is correct.
That's true. Yes. And yeah, and this is like the focus of the session of today was more about the CI/CD. We didn't go through the capabilities of Brainboard, like in terms of creating the infrastructure, generating the code and all, because I'm seeing some of the questions about the importing Azure infrastructure. Yes, Cesar, you can import your Azure infrastructure. We will be happy to help. You can reach out to the team, to Benjamin or Marcella as well. We'll be happy to help. Yeah, so we will be doing like more frequently more demos and more technical sessions on Brainboard, and more generally on how to build the modern infrastructures in a good way, with best practices, with security in mind, with awareness about costs. And we'll be happy to answer your questions and also help anyone on the journey of building the infrastructure. Any last questions, Marcella, that we have, that any topic we didn't cover till here?
Yeah, I think we covered like everything. Not everything, like if users want to know more, they have to go to Brainboard and just explore it and just try different scenarios, because there are many possibilities.
Yes. So yeah, let us know. We're still looking for feedback for the CI/CD. I know this is a new way to do the CI/CD, and it's completely different than the ways you are used to do. So reach out to us. You can reach out to us from the application. Just here you have report a bug, for example, or send feedback. You can send us the feedback when you test. Just let us know. We hear you. We keep improving the product for you. So we will be happy to get your thought. All right, so I think we are good for today. We didn't want to go overtime. Every time we take like more than 1 hour, 1 hour and a
Yeah.
half. We wanted it to be short today. Hopefully, we covered all the points, answered all your questions, and of course, reach out to us anytime you want, and we will be happy to see you the next time. Maybe the next time it's going to be something more in security, Marcella.
Yes,
I
I
know
was
you're
thinking that too.
like a lot of people are looking for it, asking about it, and you have a strong background on security. So maybe we're going to schedule something on that.
Yes, and we welcome suggestions also for the topics that we are going to cover in the next webinars.
Definitely, yes. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day or afternoon or evening or maybe morning. And see you the next time. Thanks a lot, Marcella, by the way.
Thank you. See you. Bye.
Goodbye.